This week, since the episode is all about the transition from rag paper to wood paper and how that change would reverberate through the food world, I went hunting for a paper mill, or more likely the ruins of one, that was languishing under the aegis of the National Park Service. And there is at least one. Not much of a surprise, since I am coming to understand that the NPS holds a piece of just about everything that has made a significant change to United States history. I mean, how many years until a container ship port or coal-powered electrical generation station becomes part of the collection? I mean, there's already coal veins, mines, and docks as part of the parks, so why not these as our world shifts some more? But anyway, yes, I found the ruins of a paper mill that is now part of the Chattahoochee River National Recreation Area just north of Atlanta and east of Marietta, Georgia. The ruins of the Marietta Paper Mill on the banks of Soapy Creek is a prime example of how our modern use of power and transportation technology, along with changes in paper tech, have caused once bustling locations to become lost in the wilderness. Built starting in 1855 and going into operation in 1857, this paper mill began life as a rag mill, as paper in America was still exclusively made from cotton and linen waste. Its placement on a creek was essential to its existence, as water power was used to pound the rags to transform them into paper. As wood pulp paper tech came into use, the mill switched to grinding the plentiful pine wood of the area into wood chips that would be digested for use in new wood paper. The cloth waste business turned to producing twine, which became important as paper parcels and cardboard boxes would be bound with twine before tape appeared on the packaging scene. However, as rail travel and later road travel took the role of industrial transportation away from water transport, the Marietta Paper Mill went from a bustling location to a weird factory a long way away. The shift to steam and later electrical power for industrial machines also meant that the location of a factory on a watercourse to access power was superfluous. Though many factories would continue to be located next to rivers and other bodies of water as a way to dispose of industrial waste. But that is a different problem for a different time. The Chattahoochee River is now known mainly as a spot for recreation, but for most of American history, it was a bustling highway of commerce. And the Marietta paper plant up the Soapy Creek at the top of Sibley Forest was part of the bustle. So to go see a reminder of when this part of Georgia countryside was more about bustle and not so much a vacation land, make part of your visit to the Chattahoochee Recreation Area a stop at the ruins of the Marietta Paper Mill. Episode 179. Food in Paper, Food in Boxes. Hello, and welcome to the History of American Food. This week, I'll be looking at how our national relationship with food changed when paper became cheap. Well, cheaper, anyway. Our ideas about how we purchased and stored food, as well as what we were willing to accept as clean and known, would all be altered once paper and cardboard boxes started to be used to wrap and carry our food. To find out how, pull up to your place at the table and let's dig in. The first thing you need to know is that we have come to the beginning of the end of the wooden barrel. Up until now, the barrel, the bucket, the basket, the wooden crate, and the tray were the way food traveled around. Even just coming in from the field or yard or across town. You didn't carry food ingredients about in your hands. You needed those for doing things. Instead, depending on the amount, the meat or eggs or fruit or vegetables or milk or grain, you used a container, and all of those containers were wood or cloth, or occasionally animal products. Think leather bags or the odd stomach or bladder for carrying about cheese or other liquids. But with the advent of much more plentiful paper, two things started to happen. paper could now be used for wrapping up parcels, and cardboard, the flat paperboard stuff, was available for making boxes to carry about dry food stuffs. Paper would become common in a stunning number of places. There would be butcher's paper for wrapping up cuts of meat, twists of paper for doses of drugs, cones of paper for holding pieces of hard candy or fried potatoes, and possibly, most importantly for changing American food, the paper label would come into being. The power of the paper label would be made even more so as the printing of logos and slogans extended to paperboard cardboard boxes. And the two most significant items that made their way into these early cardboard boxes were crackers and dry, grain-based cereals. In episode 130, I bring up Sylvester Graham and his fear of the animalistic tendencies brought out in humans when we enjoy our food. I find that a bit hilarious now because eschewing enjoyment is now seen as good in some circles because non-enjoyment is considered more primitive rather than more civilized, but I digress. Anyway, to avoid these uncivilized pitfalls, Graham and other like-minded observers of the human condition decided that no meat and no strongly flavored foodstuffs should pass our lips. In fact, the ingestion of things too hot or too cold, especially when we were too close to the slumbering state, were to be avoided. Thus, for these reasons and a few others, the ideas of cold cereals were devised. Now, at this point in human history, cereals were typically eaten hot, as in cooked porridges and gruels. Oat porridge or oatmeal being common in England and its surrounds. But in America, oats were at a bit of a premium as quality horse food, so corn mushes and gruels and porridges were much more common. However, if you have ever timed how long it takes to get from a cold stove to a well-cooked bowl of grits, you might consider that Graham might just have been onto something. And think about it, all we have to do now to heat up a stove is to just switch it on. There's no fiddling about with kindling and blowing on last night's coals. The cardboard box, now with branding, is firmly a child of the late 19th century. I'll save the cereal wars, including the birth of granula, granola, cornflakes, and grape nuts for another episode, but rest assured you are not missing anything by not experiencing these original recipes. The first marketed cold cereal literally had to be soaked overnight since it was effectively coarse wheat flour cement. More successful as an initial product were crackers. By the end of the 19th century, they had evolved from ship's biscuit, that twice-baked horror of both shipboard and army life, known for their teeth-breaking properties, and the fact that they were great homes for weevils, and now they were turned into something much more pleasant with the addition of a bit of fat, salt, rising agent, baking sodas, as well as the use of mechanical rollers to make them thin enough to crack invitingly. Crackers were becoming not just an addition to soups and stews and puddings as a thickener, they were even appearing as an accompaniment to soups and chowders. The oyster cracker and saltine both came into being at this time. The saltine emerged in Missouri in 1876 and was a popular partner to soups and stews served in public eating places and boarding houses as it saved baking bread. And crackers can last for months as opposed to mere days for bread. The oyster cracker, a small, puffy, rounded morsel, entered the market in the first half of the century in New England and spread around as a popular accompaniment to chowders and oysters. It, too, was a longer-lasting and simpler soup accompaniment than bread and also took advantage of rising agent, salt, and mechanical production to make the cracker tasty and appealing rather than sturdy like its hardtack ancestor. Now, hardtack and other military biscuits had traveled around in barrels or sometimes rectangular wooden crates. Being of a makeup that challenged teeth, the jostling inside wooden containers only did minor damage to the majority of the product. But the thin, crispy nature of these new crackers that were appealing enough to still be ubiquitous in the marketplace 150 years later, like right now, meant that barrels would not be ideal transport for these items. Think about it. If you were to pour several boxes of saltines in a large crate, strap it to a bicycle and take it for a 20-mile ride, maybe over a few dirt paths for variety, and then brought it back home, consider what you'd be left with. Some entire crackers, but mainly lots of crumbs and shards. Now, if this were a barrel full of crackers, a cracker barrel no less, it would also be left there for a few weeks as the crackers were purchased over time. A few vermin of the mousy sort or other could possibly visit this barrel of crackers. And of course, by the time you got to the literal bottom of the barrel, the crackers to be had would be more a sea of crumbs and possibly other unappealing things. So why suffer when you could purchase a cardboard box of crackers? And these would soon be emblazoned with comforting slogans like, "Never touched by human hands." The box itself would be glued closed, so if any sharp-toothed visitor had attempted to enter the box, the evidence would be there in the form of gnawed holes. So as America begins to get things like running water, more plentiful and effective soap, and now these individual boxes of crackers, new ideas about cleanliness and sanitary food handling begin to emerge alongside this revolution in packaging. Paper, cardboard, and the ideas of clean and sanitary food will all begin to rise together. Germ theory, the understanding that there were these microscopic alive-ish things, which we would later name bacteria and viruses and other small parasites, that could be spread or killed, was only made official in the 1880s. But at the origin of that idea, there were plenty of people who understood that there were ways to keep things clean or make them clean, and ways that things got dirty. Some absolutely were from literal dirt, and due to leaving things about too long in the warm or damp. But there were also plenty of ideas that dirty was the result of spiritual failings. And these same people spent no time at all thinking about the hows and whys things got dirty, but spent plenty of time pondering that the only way to ensure that something was clean and fit to eat was to simply inspect it themselves. But we are here now in the age of the growing city, and even more in the age of the expanding railway. Suddenly, food, even perishable foods, are coming from further away. There's milk on the milk train, beef from slaughterhouses that are far away. Cheese comes from another state. Shelf-stable fats now come in cans. How is one to sort out what is edible, clean, and fit to eat if you can't see the source? Or if you're fed the food in a pub or at one of these newfangled restaurants or at a lady's ice cream parlor? Among many new ways to assure the customer of quality when the source of the food can't be consulted is the security of the box, closed and contained. At the same time, packing food in cans and jars for preservation, transport, and sale was moving ocean products inland and moving the fruits of summer into winter. And chemical leaveners like baking soda and other new flavors were moving into kitchens. With all of that, the paper label became an increasingly important way to reassure you and to tell you what was in everything. See, up until now, the shape of a bottle, often stamped at the factory with the logo, was about as much labeling as a product got. Identification with paint, either carefully and elaborately painted for fancy things or slapped on with a stencil for more utilitarian items, was the other way information was provided. But when the ability to mechanically print labels, even in color sometimes, far more information could be affixed to products, and thus the ability to have a product touting wonderful claims and testimonials was born. With the arrival of the printed cardboard box and paper label, not only were cracker brands to be known by sight, bottled concoctions and their advertising started popping up everywhere. For without paper, the modern atmosphere or affliction phenomenon? Anyway, the ubiquity of advertising we experience now would have never gotten off the ground without the creation of cheaper and massively plentiful paper that came from trees rather than just from waste cotton and linen cloth. There is no modern advertising without the wood-based paper label. One of the most interesting and lingering offspring of the paper advertising explosion was the rise of patent medicines. As the railroad made travel easier and created a large number of isolated households across the expanding states and territories of the United States, a phenomena of mixtures of alcohol, new, readily available chemicals, as well as spices that were arriving ever more quickly and cheaply on new steamships, were combined with known and recognized herbal concoctions. They all started to spread their way across the country. And these concoctions were patent medicines. Patent implied that they were original mixtures, and medicine implied that they did something to aid you. More often than not, these were falsehoods on both counts. But patent medicines became popular as they filled a vacuum in people's lives. Without the supportive community in the face of injury and illness, what was one to do? And isolation increased as there was this rush to claim a mine or grab a desirable piece of land or to simply dash off to begin again after failure and frustration. More people than ever were living in small groups, in single families, or even alone. Technology in the form of guns, plentiful knives and axes, trains, and early packaged food were making this possible, but these tools and supplies only provided shelter and food. Sickness was still a mystery, and patent medicines purported to contain answers or solutions for your sicknesses. See, before the arrival of germ theory, medical care for problems other than physical injuries, that is, cuts, broken bones, crash injuries, sprains, and dislocations, there were few dependable solutions and even fewer clear understandings of causes. For example, a cough could mean many things, and the only clues to what it might be came from how it sounded. Was it wet or dry? And what you were coughing up. Was it green goo or black lumps or white spittle? All of that fussing about with humors back in season 1 at least had the advantage of giving names to what you saw. And it gave at least a guess at the cause. Effective treatment, such as it was, would be judged by whether you felt better and if it eventually went away. Often remedies that contained alcohol had an effect, as they would loosen phlegm and reduce pain. There are some simple plant additions that do the same and work compatibly with alcohol or even have additive effects. For example, a peppermint or licorice concoction can soothe a sore throat, and the alcohol can ease one into sleep. And of course, the opiates made it so you didn't particularly care that there was a problem. Filling this gaping hole of desperation and uncertainty, patent medicines flourished in this dawning age of rail travel and paper labels and advertisement. And to judge by the growing AI advertising onslaught on social media, podcasts, and radio, offering unregulated but fantastical sounding remedies that can rapidly fix what ails you is still a profitable business that never really went away. But labels and advertising did more than foist a plague of quick fix concoctions upon us. It also changed our fundamental relationship with how we acquire and consume food. The arrival of paper made not only advertising possible, but also our American take-out food lifestyle, which, if anything, has only ballooned since 2020. Before the 1880s, other than the hand pie or the oyster shell or the fruit peel, you can see bananas right there on the horizon. Food you took to eat on the way or while you did other things was rare. Eating was, and from the late 1800s will remain, a singular activity. You might converse or read, but that was the height of activity expected to occur. Walking or generally moving about while consuming food would have been an utterly confusing concept. Eating and usually drinking in this age was still accompanied by the act of sitting down. Though we live in a world that depends far less on paper for keeping track of and disseminating information than it did even 20 or 30 years ago, if anything, the packaging of objects in paper and paper products has only increased in that time, especially when it comes to moving objects around the planet. I mean, consider something as simple as a pair of socks. How many different packages has that pair of socks been in from inception as a product of cotton and elastine to the item that arrives on your feet? Or for food, consider that sandwich you grab from a restaurant counter or out of the refrigerated section at your local food store. All of the pieces that go into that sandwich, the flour and yeast and salt in the bread, the sliced meats or other proteins, the vegetables, the mustard, the mayonnaise, or other flavorful spreads, each of them traveled in increasingly smaller packages until they were combined at last onto 2 slices of bread to be boxed up and wrapped in paper or plastic, but that's later, for you to carry away. The late 19th century seems far removed from our coffee on the run and rapidly munched packet of protein-laced goldfish crackers, but you can see the seeds of it in the birth of paper packaging. Now, of course, at the time, there was much rejoicing. Wrapping a roast for Sunday supper or a few chops for Thursday dinner from the butcher in paper that could be used to start a fire was entirely appealing over accumulating a pile of cloths and rags that used to do the same job in a basket. Both the cloth and basket are time-consuming to make or expensive to purchase, and then they had to be cleaned between uses or they would smell. And hand laundry, let me tell you, is a giant pain. Or consider the fate of a few hard candies or boiled sweets, purchased as a treat for later, might now be safely stored in a wrapping of paper rather than having them pick up lint, insect legs, and strange small rocks and such as they rolled around in a trouser pocket. The paper packet and paper twist were boons to the growing profession of apothecary and chemist. Before paper, medicine had to be dispensed either by a doctor visit to a home or a patient visit to a shop. The glass jars and wooden boxes and cabinets where ingredients were stored were usually too valuable to be left. But now doses of powders to be stirred into liquids or to be otherwise ingested could be distributed ahead of time. Whether crackers, meat, candy, or medicine, the bringing of paper and cardboard into the American food scene is now going to upend how food moves around us and how we as humans move around with our food. Smaller quantities of staples like flour and sugar will be easy to get and carry around. A larger variety of more fragile foods can travel safely, and what we begin to bring to group meals will change. Ideas about how to store and transport food will also alter. As refrigeration expands from industrial locations and rich people homes into the everyday, we now start thinking about newfangled inventions like milk cartons, egg cartons, and cake boxes. Portable food used to be the realm of the hand pie and whole fruits. The apple and pear were basically undefeated, but with the advent of paper, the world is not just our oyster, it's a packet of sandwiches and who knows what else. So next week, it's time to take a dive into the second big diet craze that took over America. Heir to Grahamism, with its fear of meat, enjoyment of food, and other matters of uncivilization, the newest health revelation will introduce the American eater to cold cereal, and the idea that breakfast should be a whole separate type of food from the rest of our meals. Justice for dinner pancakes is such a long way off, alas. So join me to hear how breakfast in America became the first meal of capitalism. Thanks for listening. And also, thanks for your patience. And I am working to get back up on top of that pile of research so I can continue with an episode each week. It also looks like there are more really fun people who know lots about the corners of food I am interested in too, so there are likely to be a few more interviews. Now, I hope they're mostly bonus episodes, but they may be in the mainline spot now and then. But to do interviews, I need to invest in a little more technology access, which is why I'm toying with a tiny bit of advertising. I still plan on doing the same level of discovery and raiding the library stacks for information that simply isn't out there on the internet. Believe it or not, lots of books are not available electronically, even as many more have been eaten by computers. So do let people know of my 100% human-researched and written podcast. It'll continue to be what it is, and I hope you continue to enjoy it. And if you do, please leave a review on your favorite podcatcher out there. Any email questions or quibbles will continue to reach me at thehistoryofamericanfood@gmail.com. And as always, I love hearing what you have to say in your reviews. Music for this podcast is Fingerlympics by Dr. Turtle, and you can find me on Threads, Blue Sky, and Insta as @THOA Food, and all this information is available in the show description.